We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. When the Minister was asked on Thursday by Sky's Kieran Gilbert why 2 murderers released from immigration detention were not being electronically monitored, the Minister responded he was, quote, using drones to keep track of these people. We know where they are. What was the basis of the advice that led to this latest example of gross incompetence?
The call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thanks, Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Minister for his question. Over the last week, I've cancelled 30 visas in the national interest. By the end of this week, we will have in place a new revised ministerial direction. And as the Shadow Minister said last week in an interview on Sky News, I did state that Operation Aegis was using drones. I relied on information provided by my department at the time, which has since been clarified.
Members on my left.
As part of the work monitoring and supporting community safety, Operation Aegis draws on information from a range of sources using different technologies, including aerial open source and other imagery through their work with state and territory law enforcement bodies. Now, our strong laws, Speaker, impose strict visa conditions on everyone in the NZYQ cohort who were released following the High Court decision. This can include electronic monitoring, curfews, financial reporting, spot checks, random home visits, as well as other mandatory conditions, which means the location of every individual is known. As the government has consistently said, community safety is our #1 priority, and we will always act to keep Australians safe.
The member for Moncrief will cease interjecting. Give a call to the honourable member for Lingiari.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government continuing to deliver cheaper medicines for all Australians? How would this help deliver cost-of-living relief for millions of Australians after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Good question.
Give a call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to thank the member for Lingiari for her question, because 2 years ago she promised members of her community that if elected we would make medicines cheaper, and we have been busy delivering on that promise ever since. In our first 3 months alone of government, we slashed the maximum amount that millions of pensioners and concession card holders would pay for all of their medicines needs in a given year by 25%. In our first 12 months, we delivered the biggest cut to the price of medicines in the 75-year history of the PBS, saving general patients more than $20 million each and every month. And in our first 18 months, we finally allowed doctors to prescribe a range of common medicines for chronic conditions for 60 days' supply rather than just 30, saving patients time and even more money, Mr Speaker, because all along we have been committed to a triple bottom line in community pharmacy: cheaper medicines for patients, better health care for patients and, importantly, a strong community pharmacy sector. And that is why we reinvested every single dollar the Commonwealth saved under 60-day scripts back into community pharmacy. So this year, for example, for the first time, pharmacies are able to deliver flu shots to pensioners, shingles vaccines to pensioners, completely free of charge, paid for by the Commonwealth. And it's also why we agreed to bring forward negotiations for a new agreement, Mr Speaker. And today we delivered on that commitment, signing a new 5-year agreement with the Pharmacy Guild of Australia. This new agreement makes medicines even cheaper again, Mr Speaker, by freezing medicine co-payments for patients for up to 5 years, increasing the number of free medicine Webster packs that pharmacies can deliver by 50%, paid for by the Commonwealth. And importantly, Mr Speaker, this new agreement sets up a strong, secure foundation and future for the thousands of community pharmacies, hard-working pharmacists all across the country who play such an important role in the health of our nation.
Member for Gippsland.
And I want to thank the Guild, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank our department negotiating team for their hard work. This was a robust negotiation, Mr Speaker, and so it should be when you're trying to achieve a triple bottom line. Those opposite would have had us give up at the first hint of pressure. Those opposite would have had us leave patients high and dry, as they did in government time and time again, making them pay more for their medicines, not less, Mr Speaker. But we were determined to deliver an agreement that was good for patients and good for community pharmacy, and today we delivered on that commitment.
The Leader of the Nationals interjected 9 times during that answer. If he persists in that course of behaviour, he won't be here for the remainder of question time. He is now warned. Order. Members on my may follow shortly. Give the call to the honourable member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. Will the minister release the advice that led him to say drones were being used to monitor detainees?
Give a call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thanks, Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Minister for his question again. I've answered his question already. I relied on information provided by my department.
Order.
And
resume your seat. Resume your seat. Order. We're just going to repeat what I said last week in terms of now we're 14 seconds into the question, so I anticipate it's going to be a point on relevance. So just whatever happens from now on, there won't be able to be further any clarification, but he has the call.
Yeah. It's relevance, Speaker. Relevance, Speaker.
Yep.
The question was very direct and very simple. Will you release the advice?
So I have been following this issue quite carefully in terms of relevance and order. The Prime Minister will cease interjecting. The Minister was asked a specific question, but it is difficult to take a point of order on relevance when I don't know what's going to happen for the remainder 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So correct, at this stage he hasn't answered your question. I appreciate you'd like a yes-no answer, but as the Shadow Minister knows, under the standing orders that is not eligible. So I'm just going to ask the Prime Minister will just cease interjecting. Order. The member for Deakin will join him as well. So we just want to be able to deal with this issue of relevance. So the minister now has 2 minutes and 48 seconds to answer the question. It's just going to make sure he is being that he's being directly relevant to the answer that he is giving.
Speaker, and I think I have answered the question, but what we've seen here is the Shadow Minister loving it at the dispatch box. He really does. And I think that's what it tells us is that his real target is the record of the Leader of the Opposition here, because he knows, as we know, that if the Leader of the Opposition was held to the standard that he seeks to hold others, he would not have lasted a day in the job. This is a bloke who trashed our immigration system, who trashed integrity, who trashed enforcement, who let nearly 1,300 people out, not via a court, not via a tribunal, without any constraints on their behaviour. That's the measure of the man. The Shadow Minister obviously agrees with me.
Order. The member for Petrie will cease interjecting. So I can hear from the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How will the community pharmacy agreement that was signed today help strengthen Australia's healthcare system? Is there any opposition to the critical work of investing in public health?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Werriwa for her question and for her ongoing concern for the people of South West Sydney to have their cost of living pressures alleviated by government actions. And that's precisely what we have done, because the government's cheaper medicines policy has already saved Australians more than $370 million from the cost of their medicines, and overwhelmingly that has gone to benefit low and middle-income earners. Today we took the next step, signing the 8th Community Pharmacy Agreement, making sure that cheaper medicines are here to stay, but also to help pharmacists deliver more health services in their local communities. All up, the deal is worth $26.5 billion over 5 years, and it includes a range of measures, freezing PBS co-payments, delivering that cost of living relief for 1 year for every single person with a Medicare card, but for 5 years for pensioners and concession card holders. That means cheaper medicines will stay cheaper, not rising with inflation. Now, community pharmacists, of course, are such trusted and valued members of our community. Australians rely on them for advice and for support. And today I spoke to one of my local pharmacists, Adele Tahan, who is the Vice President of the Pharmacy Guild, and she certainly welcomed the delivery of this support. Now, we're making sure that community pharmacies can continue to play that vital role, including dosing advice and assistance for people who take multiple medications to ensure they're taking the right dose at the right time and avoiding mistakes and waste. We're increasing the regional pharmacy maintenance allowance. We're building on the actions that this government took in our first 2 years. 60-day prescriptions, remember them? Those opposite opposed it day after day, week after week, month after month. They said it would lead to the shutting down of pharmacies. Well, today pharmacists have signed up to 60-day prescriptions. We've established 58 Medicare urgent care clinics with another 29 on the way, and we've tripled the bulk billing incentive. Now, Labor built Medicare, and we will always protect it and will always strengthen it. This year marks 10 years since the infamous 2014 budget, a budget that tried to establish a GP tax, cut $50 billion from hospital funding and wanted to increase the costs of pharmaceuticals. The contrast is clear. This side of the House standing up for patients and for farmers.
Give the call. Before I call the member for Indi, I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is the Honourable Minister Lejeune Mipot-Jonet, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations of the Kingdom of Lesotho. On behalf of the House, welcome to question time. And give the call to the honourable member for Indi.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. In a cost of living crisis, rooftop solar and home batteries can save thousands on bills and reduce emissions. Last week, the first low-interest loans under the Household Energy Upgrade Fund were announced. But these loans represent just 6% of the $1 billion promised. How much of the remaining $940 million will be delivered before the next election?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I appreciate the question from the honourable member, and of course she's 100% right. The opportunity to assist households in delivering more renewable energy for themselves and, where possible, storage through a battery is a very real one for reducing bills and reducing emissions. That's why we did allocate $1 billion in the last budget, and the honourable member is correct. Last Friday, I opened with the Assistant Minister round one, which is a $60 million allocation to the provider Plenty, and provides interest rate discounts of between 2.74% and 3.3%. That's a discount off their standard green loan for things like solar panels, batteries, EV charging at home, efficient air conditioning and other things. Of course, it's appropriate that the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which is delivering this program on behalf of the government, has engaged in very strong due diligence to ensure value for taxpayers. Due diligence in terms of the providing partners. They opened applications for partnership last December. That closed in March, and I was pleased to announce the first round last week. I expect to make other announcements in coming weeks and months. This is very much the first. There is much more to do. We intend to get many of these rounds out the door as soon as possible, and to see that $1 billion spent, that $1 billion allocated and spent in providing the concessional loans to families. Now, of course, we'll see what the take-up rate is. It's a demand-driven program in that respect. We have to see the take-up. I can assure the honourable member I'll keep her updated, but we intend to roll out this scheme and to see it work to help households deliver themselves renewable energy, which will reduce their bills and reduce emissions.
Give a call to the honourable member for Boothby.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. What does today's annual wage review decision mean for Australian workers, and what has been the response to low-paid workers getting a pay rise?
Yeah, great. Give a call to the Minister for Employment, Workplace Relations and Minister for the Arts.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I thank the member for Boothby for the question. And in the seat of Boothby, like in every electorate, every taxpayer is now counting down the days where every taxpayer gets a tax cut, and every award worker now knows on the same date, 1st of July, they've got a pay rise heading their way. 3.75% increase, which means once again we have an annual wage review that is making sure that people are keeping in front of inflation. This means when you add up, and remember the annual wage review was one of the great controversies during the election campaign, when the Leader of the Opposition, as he then was, now the Prime Minister of Australia, said, looking for the dollar coin, where he said that we were committed to making sure that low-paid workers didn't go backwards. Those opposite described it as a dangerous policy for Australians. And they can't say, oh, that was just the policy of the Morrison government, because even this morning the words from Senator Hume were that if low-paid workers got real wages growth, she said this morning, that would be the worst thing for Australians. The worst thing for Australians. Being on a unity ticket between Senator Hume and the member for Hume, who's previously argued that he opposed our laws because they pushed up wages, and the Leader of the Opposition opposed them because he said, and I quote, it was going to result in higher wages. As a result of this, we now have 3 annual wage reviews that have been brought down in the space of 2 years. In those 2 years, under Prime Minister Albanese, we have a greater increase in the minimum wage in 2 years than those opposite had in their entire decade in office. In 2 years, the minimum wage has gone up by more than it did under those in their entire time in office. For full-time workers, the combination of the pay rise and the tax cuts means retail workers are about to have $102 a week extra in their bank account. Cleaners, $103 a week extra in their bank account. Because of the combination of the pay rise and the tax cuts on the 1st of July, hairdressers will get $106 a week extra in their bank account. Minimum wage workers, $120 a week extra in their bank account. And aged care workers, because of the work that this government's done in supporting a pay rise for aged care workers, $200 a week extra in their bank account. This government said we would get wages moving. Those opposite want people to work longer for less, when this government wants people to earn more and keep more of what they earn.
Give the call to the honourable member for Moncrieff.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. On 13 February, following the release of 149 hardcore criminals, the Minister told the House that, quote, each one of them is being continuously monitored and, quote, all of the individuals in the cohort are being continuously monitored. Minister, 153 criminals have now been released, and it's been revealed that more than half of them are not wearing a monitoring device.
The member will begin her question again. The Minister for Home Affairs and Cybersecurity, I can't hear what the question is because you're continually interjecting. So, out of courtesy and respect for the member for Moncrieff, she will begin her question again. We'll reset the clock so that I can hear the question.
Thank you, Speaker.
Member for Moncrieff has the call.
My question is to the Minister for Immigration. On 13 February, following the release of 149 hardcore criminals, the Minister told the House that, quote, each one of them is being continuously monitored, and, quote, all of the individuals in the cohort are being continuously monitored. Minister, 153 criminals have now been released, and it's been revealed that more than half of them are not wearing a monitoring device. How else are they being continuously monitored?
Give a call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for Moncrieff for her question. Now, we remember on this side of the House that it was Peter Dutton's delegate, the Leader of the Opposition's delegate, I say, that let someone out of immigration detention when his delegate gave them a visa. No monitoring, no reporting, no conditions. That person who went on, allegedly, to commit an attack. And he's been strangely silent about this, Speaker, hasn't he? He's got a lot to say about others, very little to say about his own record.
Member for Law.
We are not interested in playing politics with this issue. We are interested in community safety. And I'd refer the honourable member to the evidence given in Senate estimates to by the ABF, who corresponded what we have done in terms of community safety. $250 million has been invested to support our strong laws. We have Operation Aegis in place to bring together state and territory law enforcement officials. And as he said, we know where all these people are.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What does today's Fair Work Commission decision mean for the workers of Australia, and how does the Albanese Labor government's response differ to the previous approaches?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Speaker. I'm very grateful to the member for Holt for her question. She has spent her entire working life championing the cause of the low-paid in this country, and I acknowledge that work. We welcome the decision by the Fair Work Commission to increase minimum wages by 3.75%. This is the real wage increase that low-paid workers need and deserve, Mr Speaker. This is a win for 2.6 million workers and their loved ones. This means workers on the minimum wage get an extra $33.10 a week and $1,721 more per year. This means more money in the pockets of our lowest-paid workers and more help with the cost of living. Under this Prime Minister and under his government, the minimum wage has now increased by $143 a week and $7,452 a year. And this is on top of the bigger $870 tax cut that will flow from next month as well. Those opposite wanted no tax cut for those workers. They wanted lower wages for these workers. They want Australians to work longer for less.
The Treasurer will pause. The member for Casey has been interjecting right throughout question time, every question. He'll leave the chamber under 94A. There is no excuse for every single question and answer for continual interjections. We're starting off the week on a strong foot. The Treasurer has the call.
He should be careful, Mr Speaker, or Josh Frydenberg might be in his seat when he gets back. Mr Speaker, our economic plan is all about helping people earn more and keep more of what they earn. We see decent wages as part of the solution to the cost of living challenge, not part of the problem. It's why we're getting wages moving again. It's why we're fighting inflation. It's why we're delivering a tax cut for every Australian taxpayer. Now, Mr Speaker, real wages were falling when we come to office, and now they are growing again. Nominal wages have been growing almost twice as fast under us as they were growing under those opposite. They've grown faster than 4% annual for 3 consecutive quarters now, and that didn't happen once under those opposite when they were pursuing a policy of deliberate wage suppression, which gave us a decade of wage stagnation, a defining feature of their economic mismanagement. Mr Speaker, we know people are still under pressure and the economy is soft. Treasury's forecasts anticipate weak growth in our economy, and we expect to see that in the national accounts on Wednesday. That's why our budget is about helping people with the cost of living and getting the budget in better nick without smashing the economy. A slash-and-burn budget would have been dead wrong in these circumstances, when growth is soft and people are already hurting. And that's why our balanced approach and our responsible economic management is bang on, because it fights inflation, it takes weak growth into account, it gets wages growing again, and it puts people front and centre, Mr Speaker. And that's why today's decision to ensure our lowest paid workers don't go backwards is so welcome.
Give a call to the honourable member for Flinders.
My question is to the Minister for Immigration and concerns the meetings held by the Prime Minister with then New Zealand Prime Minister in mid-2022. Did the Minister have any conversations with the Prime Minister or his office detailing what needed to be implemented following the commitment given by the Prime Minister to the then New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern around visa cancellations?
Give a call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thanks, Speaker, and I thank the member for Flinders for her question. Now, obviously, I can't speak to meetings the Prime Minister had with any other Prime Minister or indeed any other person the Prime Minister had meetings with. What I can say is that I did the work for Ministerial Direction 99 with my office in our national interest.
Order. Order. Members on my left will cease interjecting. Order. The Minister for Immigration will cease interjecting. Members on my left, I wanted to hear from the member for Tangney.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Sport. How is the Albanese Labor government working for older Australians and the people who care for them?
Call to the Minister for Aged Care and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Tangney very much for his question. I want to wish his aged care residents and his aged care workers, alongside himself, a very happy WA Day, which I'm told is a very big deal. From our very first day in government, we have been working for older Australians and for the people who care for them, working on putting nurses back into nursing homes and working on making sure that older people have the care that they need with the quality that they deserve, working on making sure that our dedicated aged care workers are paid fairly for the crucial and highly skilled work that they perform. The May budget marks a 30% increase in funding for aged care under the Albanese government since our first budget in October 2022. And in this budget, there's a further $2.2 billion to help people stay at home for longer, with more home care packages, to upgrade digital infrastructure, to improve regulation and to attract more workers. And the work we're doing is already having a hugely positive impact for older people and for the dedicated carers looking after them. Today, there is a registered nurse on site in aged care 98.88% of the time on average in Australia.
Great job.
Older Australians are receiving an additional 3.6 million minutes of care every single day. And workers are being paid more than they ever have before after a 15% increase to award wage minimums, an $11.3 billion investment in the people who dedicate their working lives to caring for older Australians. And of course, we know there is more to come with the final decision of the Independent Fair Work Commission on Stage 3 of the work value case, on top of a tax cut for every single aged care worker from the 1st of July. After the budget, I went to far north Queensland to talk with aged care residents, with aged care workers and a home care recipient about their experiences in aged care. And I met a remarkable young worker named Clyde at Edge Hill Orchards in Manoora in the member for Leichhardt's electorate. Clyde was brought up by his mum and his grandma, and his strong family values drew him to working in aged care. So he started working as a personal care worker at Edge Hill Orchards with his mum Tracy, who works in the kitchen. And Clyde told me that his pay rise, supported and funded by the Albanese government, helped him to get his Certificate 3, something that he had been struggling to do before the pay rise. And Clyde now wants to go on and do a Certificate 4, and then eventually get his bachelor's, all while continuing his career in aged care, preferably at Edge Hill. That is what we have been working towards. That is who we have been working for, people like Clyde. And the Albanese government has been working for people like Clyde and the residents he so passionately cares for, and we will continue to do that, delivering positive change aged care has needed for so long.
Order. Give a call to the Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Andrew Clennell of Sky News has reported that following the Prime Minister's meetings with Jacinta Ardern and prior to the introduction of Direction 99, the Prime Minister's department directly instructed the Home Affairs Department to attempt to find a way to stop the deportation of so many New Zealand citizens and to, quote, fix the problem. Prime Minister, is this true?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the Deputy Leader for his opposition. And Sky News, her question. Sky News occasionally don't get things right. I know they'll come. Usually it's at night, usually during the day, before it becomes dark, when truth sort of gets darkened as the day goes on. But the truth is that I, unlike my predecessor, have a job. I don't have multiple jobs. I haven't sworn myself into multiple portfolios, including to Home Affairs, into Treasury. I'm also not the Health Minister. And what we do is we have ministers who have responsibility for doing their jobs. Now, let me be clear. Section 501 remains in place. This has not changed. We continue to refuse and cancel visas on character grounds. We continue to deport people who have no right to be here. Since coming to government, we've deported over 4,200 individuals from immigration detention. Now, that stands in stark contrast to one of the people who was sworn in as Home Affairs Minister, who on the Leader of the Opposition's watch, almost 1,300 hardcore criminals were released from immigration detention centres, not because of a High Court decision, not because he had to do it, but they were released without any curfews, no ankle bracelets, any monitoring, no regard for community safety. It included 102 sex offenders, 40 domestic violence offenders and 4 murderers, alleged murderers or accessories to murder.
Call to the order. Give the call to the honourable member for Moreton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. How is the Albanese Labor government working to make early learning more affordable and to ensure early childhood educators earn more and keep more of what they earn?
Call to the Minister for Early Childhood Education and Minister for Youth.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I do thank the wonderful member for Moreton for his question and for his interest in a quality early childhood education and care system for all Australian children. Now, Mr Speaker, this government's #1 priority is cost of living relief for every Australian, and that's why we introduced our cheaper childcare reforms in our very first year. Reforms, I might remind the House, that those opposite said were unnecessary. Reforms that have reduced out-of-pocket expenses by, on average, 11% for centre-based care. Reforms that provide cost of living relief for more than 1 million Australian families. Now, Mr Speaker, I'm proud of what the Albanese Labor government has achieved in our 2 years of office. But we know that there is more to do to reach our vision of an affordable, accessible and inclusive early childhood education and care system. The Productivity Commission and the ACCC have told us that we can't do that, we can't reach that vision without a sustainable and stable workforce. And we know that the key to this is wages, because as early childhood workers tell me all the time, we love what we do, but love doesn't pay the bills. Now, that's why we passed legislation to get wages moving and close the gender pay gap. That's why we advocated for a wage increase in 3 annual wage reviews decisions since we came to government. And from next month, Mr Speaker, that means that a further 3.7% pay rise to early childhood workers. We've also provisioned funding in this year's budget for a wage increase for early childhood workers as well. But that's not all, Mr Speaker, because our tax cuts will bring further cost of living relief. $829 on average for the average early childhood educator, $1,404 for the average early childhood teacher, back into the pockets of the people who do some of the most important work in our society. Now, Mr Speaker, we know that the Coalition deliberately kept wages low, contributing to a workforce crisis in early childhood education and care.
Order. The member for Lingiari. The minister will pause. The manager of opposition on point of order.
Well, Mr Speaker, on relevance, there's no scope in the language of the question to be delving into the record of the Coalition. The minister has veered off script and should be directed back to legitimate territory for her answer.
I agree with the manager. There was no question about. There was nothing in the question about alternative policies or approaches or even history. So the minister is going to have to return back to the question and cease those remarks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And on the topic of wage increases, which this side of the House supports for early childhood education and care workers, while those opposite continue to say no to everything, we on this side are getting on with the job of ensuring that early childhood education and care workers earn more and keep more of what they earn.
The call to the Leader of the Australian Greens.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Donald Trump has repeatedly said that immigrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of America, a phrase with a very dark history, and that, quote, they're not humans, they're animals. He wants direct climate action, and last week he also said the judge that convicted him was corrupt. Prime Minister, isn't it clear that this man is a danger to democracy, to Australia and the world? Will you join us in condemning Donald Trump and commit to a full review of Australia's relationship with the US if this dangerous man is elected president?
Yeah. Order. Order. Members on my right, I'll just hear from the Leader of the House before I deal with that question.
Mr Speaker, the starting point for everything in question time is for ministers to be asked about ministerial responsibility. This question, can I suggest we go down this path, then the whole premise for question time falls over, and I'd suggest moving to the next question as an option.
It is an option, but I try and be fair to try and allow every member to ask their question. Obviously, a statement by another person or world leader, the Prime Minister or any minister could not be responsible for. So you can't ask an opinion under the standing orders. I'm just going to allow the Leader of the Australian Greens, as I've done with other members, to rephrase the question to ensure that any question he asked is relevant to the Prime Minister or Minister's responsibilities.
Prime Minister.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting. The Leader of the Australian Greens has the call.
Prime Minister, will you join us in condemning Donald Trump and commit to a full review of Australia's relationship with the United States if this dangerous man is elected president?
I've still got difficulties with the question because you're asking for an opinion. You're asking for an opinion, not government policy, outcome. So the order. Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. So I'll just give the Leader one more chance, the Leader of the Australian Greens, one more chance to relate to the responsibility. Question time under the standing orders are about the responsibilities, not opinions or hypothetical questions.
As Prime Minister, will you commit to a full review of Australia's relationship with the United States if candidate Donald Trump is elected president?
It's barely within the standing orders, but the Prime Minister will be able to order. The Prime Minister will be because it is so broad and it is barely within, the Prime Minister will be able to answer it in a very broad way. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. As Prime Minister of this great nation of Australia, I regard the relationships that we have as being very important, an important part of my undertaking as having the great honour of being sworn in as Australia's 31st Prime Minister. One of my priorities upon being sworn in was to repair and improve relations internationally, right around the globe. That is something that I have done. If you look at the relationship with the United States and the United Kingdom, two historic relationships that have been very important for us. The United Kingdom, of course, for a long period of time, given our history, and of course the United States, particularly in the wake of John Curtin's correct and courageous decision to put our national defence of Australia first during World War II, and the important alliance we have had with the United States of America since then. That relationship is a relationship not between leaders, it's a relationship between people and between nations. It's one that is very important and enduring and will continue to be into the future. At the same time, we've repaired our relationships with countries like France, with other countries in Europe. We've got as good a relationship as we have ever had with the ASEAN nations. A priority has been our region. So whether it be hosting the Australia-ASEAN Forum in Melbourne in March, something that saw the leader of every single ASEAN nation come personally and to participate fully in that forum was very positive. Similarly, our relationship with the Pacific Island Forum has been so important as well. I note that coming up we will have CHOGM hosted in the country of Samoa coming up as well, and that will be an important time for us to renew our relationship with Commonwealth nations. In addition to that, of course, in a short period of time, we will welcome the Premier of China to Australia as well. We'll make announcements at appropriate times about that. That will be a positive thing, given that China is our major trading partner, and given the important regional relationships. We do have strategic competition. We are attempting to manage that competition in Australia's national interest, always speaking up for our national interest. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to do that in a mature way that represents our nation's interests.
Good call to the honourable member for Corwell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting Australian families and easing cost of living pressures? What could jeopardise this support in the future?
Good call to the Minister for Social Services.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Corwell for her question as well. Of course, the Albanese government's #1 priority is providing cost of living relief for every Australian. Now, we know many families are under pressure, and our government is working hard to deliver meaningful relief without adding to inflation. Now, on the 1st of July, 1.3 million low and middle-income families will see their family tax benefit payment rates increase after indexation is applied. Now, nearly 1 million pensioners will also benefit from the increases to income and asset limits, meaning they can have higher incomes and assets before their pensions are affected. Now, in addition, income eligibility for paid parental leave will also increase on the 1st of July, taking the family income threshold to just over $364,000. Now, of course, regular indexation of payments and thresholds is an important part of a strong social safety net. And for Australians accessing support when they need it, indexation is there to keep pace with the cost of living. Now, unfortunately, this view is not shared by everyone. It is unfortunate that we now have the member for Hume suggesting if he was Treasurer, he would cut this so-called unrestrained spending which of course includes the cost of indexing family payments. Now, Mr Speaker, those opposite do have a track record of letting family payments stagnate with back-to-back indexation freezes when they were last in government, and of course they also tried to stop parents from accessing both their government and employer-paid parental leave, of course labelling them as double dippers. Now, while those opposite will seek to deny families the payment they deserve, we will get on with the job of delivering. As well as applying indexation on the 1st of July, our government, that date will mark our government's historic expansion for paid parental leave. Now, of course, detailed in the budget, we announced that we will pay superannuation on this leave from July next year. Superannuation on paid parental leave is a critical step to ensuring parents who take time off work after the birth or adoption of a child do not retire with less. And of course, 330,000 low and middle income families with dependent children will also benefit with the further 10% increase to the maximum rate of rent assistance, our second consecutive increase in 2 budgets. When it comes to cost of living, we're also delivering a tax cut for every taxpayer and energy bill relief to every household. It is the Albanese government that looks after families.
Concluded. Call to the honourable member for Riverina.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. In the Prime Minister's June 2022 press conference with then New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, after the Prime Minister told the media, "We had a wonderful dinner last night," then the Prime Minister said, "Prime Minister Ardern's concerns are very clear. We'll work through them in an orderly way." What steps did the Prime Minister direct be taken to give effect to his commitment to work through Jacinda Ardern's concerns about deportations in an orderly way?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the member for Riverina for his question. And I'm asked a question of do we work things through in an orderly way? Yes, we do. Last week I was asked a question which suggested that common sense should apply to politics. Yes, it should. This is a rabbit hole which they insist on going down. Now, there are 2 issues here. One is citizenship, that we put in place changes to make it easier for New Zealanders to become Australian citizens who've been here for a long period of time. More than 20,000 people have taken up that opportunity. More than 20,000. That's a good thing that occurs. It's a good thing that people who've been here for a long period of time commit to Australia and become citizens. Now, with regard to ministerial directions, Direction 99 set a similar tone to that which applied under the Leader of the Opposition when he was Minister for Home Affairs. Direction 90, signed by then Minister Alex Hawke in 2021, talked of a higher level of tolerance for criminals who have lived in the Australian community for most of their lives. Direction 79, signed when the Leader of the Opposition was the Senior Minister, used the same phrase. So did Direction 65, issued in 2014 by then Immigration Minister Scott Morrison. So there's nothing new in any of these things. In terms of the
Order. The Attorney-General is warned. I want to hear from the member for Wannon on a point of order.
Thanks, Speaker. It's relevant. Ministerial Direction 99 made those ties a primary consideration.
Yeah. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, I just refer to your earlier rulings about abuses of points of order.
As a common use phrase in this chamber of serial offenders, the member for Wannon just needs to state the point of order on relevance, not give extra statements. So the Prime Minister was asked about what steps he took to work through regarding a decision regarding meetings from June 2022. He's making direct references around the decision that was made and directions that are made. He is being directly relevant, but I'm just going to make sure that he continues to be directly relevant regarding he needs to keep talking about the steps, and so far he is doing that. And I'll allow him to continue.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. For example, in February 2019, the AAT decided a Congo-born man who had convictions for a sex offence involving a girl aged under 14 and for repeatedly breaching his bail conditions should be allowed to stay in Australia. The decision cited Ministerial Direction 65. What did the current opposition leader do? Absolutely nothing. It's alleged that this individual then went on to re-offend. These allegations are serious in nature. Domestic violence, torture, assault while armed, assault while occasioning bodily harm, deprivation of liberty. The victims were his own children, including his 5-year-old son who was left in a coma. He was arrested and is currently in remand pending a trial. The Leader of the Opposition did nothing. This Minister for Immigration has cancelled his visa.
Order. Order. Members on my left and right. Give a call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government's plan working to lower energy prices? What energy policies have been rejected at home and overseas?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thanks very much. I thank my honourable friend for the question. What a champion of regional Australia the member for Bendigo is, Mr Speaker. And the member for Bendigo knows that the Albanese government's coal and gas caps, together with the rebates in the budget before last, have worked to put downward pressure, real downward pressure on prices, which we saw reflected in the default market offer just a couple of weeks ago. And that's been followed, of course, by the $300 rebates which go to every single energy bill in the country in the Treasurer's budget delivered just a few weeks ago. But we also know, Mr Speaker, that renewables are the cheapest form of energy, and getting more renewable energy into the grid is good for prices. And we aren't the only ones who know that, Mr Speaker. Around the world, that is understood by governments around the world. Last year, 130 countries signed a pledge to triple renewable energy by 2030. 130 countries tripling renewable energy by 2030. Now, the honourable member asked me what policies are being rejected at home and abroad, and the answer is, of course, the most expensive form of energy. And this is a very important point, because that is nuclear energy, and we've had a lot of misinformation from honourable members opposite. The Leader of the National Party is keen to say, look at America. Look what's happening in America, he says. Well, what's happening in America is the cancellation of a small modular reactor after a 70% cost blowout. That's what's happening in America. We've had the member for Hinkler and our old friend, the member for New England, say we are the only OECD country without nuclear power. Well, in fact, there are 16 OECD countries without nuclear power, Mr Speaker, 16. But the Leader of the Opposition himself says, and he says this all the time, Australia is the only country of the G20 that hasn't got nuclear power as part of its energy mix, or hasn't committed to doing so as part of their domestic energy mix. We've all heard him say it repeatedly. Now, the G20 is a very important organisation. A key member of the G20 is Germany, the third or fourth largest economy in the world, depending on the measure. They closed their last nuclear power station last year, in April, Mr Speaker. The Chancellor of Germany says nuclear energy is over to that horse. Oh, they say they get it from France. France and Germany are different countries. One has the Eiffel Tower and one has the Brandenburg Gate. They are different places. They speak different languages.
Order. Members on my right. The member for Moreton will cease interjecting. Order. I want to hear from the... All right, the member for Fairfax is entitled to raise a point of order. He'll be heard in silence. That's the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the Minister
can't be relevant.
Order.
Can't be relevant if he doesn't understand that Germany imports electricity from France.
Resume
And the Minister would like.
No, you don't have my permission, so resume your seat. Minister will just pause for a moment. Minister will just pause as well. Look, it was a nice try, but I had been specific with the member for Wannon about the process. We can't have a situation where people get up and debate or point of order with relevance. Question time has never worked like that. It's not going to start like that. So the member for Fairfax will leave the chamber for abuse of standing orders. Okay, the Minister in continuation.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Another country in the G20 is Italy. Italy banned nuclear power in 1987 after a referendum. To be fair, they did have a go in 2011. They held another referendum and found 94% of voters against nuclear power in Italy, Mr Speaker. I don't think that's a commitment to get nuclear power in Italy, which is also in the G20. You know, if the opposition could clear all this up, they could clear it up by releasing their policies and their costings and start telling the truth about nuclear power, not misleading little grabs,
Order.
Mr Speaker. Tell the truth and release your policies.
Concluded. Order. Order. The Minister for Climate Change will cease interjecting. Order. When the House comes to order, I'd like to hear from the member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, there are now 422 medications on the TGA medicine shortage report list. These include blood thinners, medications for glaucoma and HRT patches. My constituents can't access the Novavax and the Shingrix vaccines. Medication shortages in this country are getting worse, they're not getting better. What is your plan for ensuring Australians can have access to the vaccines and the medicines that they need and deserve?
Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Kooyong for her question. I'll deal with Novavax and Shingrix perhaps first of all. As the member knows, the Novavax original vaccine was finally approved and made available a couple of years ago in Australia. Take-up was pretty low and it dropped off very quickly. The original vaccine was withdrawn from the market more than 12 months ago in Australia because essentially Novavax stopped making it. As the member probably knows, the Omicron version of the vaccine has been considered by TGA for registration here in Australia over some time. I'm advised a few weeks ago Novavax decided to withdraw that application for registration. I encourage Novavax to continue working with the TGA. We would like to see as many COVID vaccines on the market as possible, but ultimately that is a matter for the company. In terms of Shingrix, we have the most comprehensive shingles vaccine program in the world. Take-up by older Australians was phenomenal and about 40% higher than we projected using the usual forecasting models. As a result, we negotiated the supply of an additional 750,000 doses of the Shingrix vaccine, which has already been delivered over recent weeks to all of the state and territory governments. That should be hitting vaccination points, GP surgeries and pharmacies pretty much as we speak, and we've got another 400,000 as well being delivered in May and June. So we hope that some of those supply issues should be resolved. The member, though, points to a broader challenge countries across the world are having right now in a global market with the supply of a range of really important medicines. And TGA works with those sponsors to try and resolve those supply concerns. We work with doctors and pharmacies where possible to arrange alternatives to a medicine that might be in global supply shortage. We do that as much as we can. The number of medicines in short supply now is around 400, as the member says. Before COVID, when the mandatory reporting regime started in 2019, it was in the order of 300 to 400, so it's certainly a little higher, but not phenomenally high. But I'm still very concerned about this. Can I finish by saying this as well, Mr Speaker? The member for Industry and Science today is at Bio 2024, the largest biotech conference in the world, promoting our Future Made in Australia policy, because we want to make more medicines and vaccines here, which is why medicines and medtech are a priority area for the National Reconstruction Fund. We've seen manufacturing drop off over the last decade or decade and a half. We want to turn that around and make sure that we're making more of those medicines here in Australia and have our own sovereign capability.
Give the call to the member for Fremantle.
Thank you, Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to provide cost of living relief to teaching, nursing and social work students?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the fantastic member for Fremantle for his question. The budget wipes about $3 billion of HECS debt for more than 3 million Australians, and that includes more than 21,000 people in the member for Fremantle's electorate. What this means is if you've got an average HECS debt of $26,000, then your debt will be cut by about $1,200. If you've got a debt of $45,000, it will be cut by $2,000. If you've got a HECS debt of $60,000, it will be cut by around $2,700. The member for Fremantle asks me about cost of living relief for teaching and nursing and social work students. The budget includes, for the first time ever, financial support for those students to help them while they do their prac, the practical part of their degree. A lot of students have told me that when they do their prac, they've often got to give up their part-time job. Sometimes they've got to move away from home. And for a lot of people, that can mean delaying finishing their degree or not finishing it at all. We need more teachers, we need more nurses, we need more midwives and we need more social workers. These are people who've signed up to do some of the most important jobs in this country, to educate our kids, to look after us when we're ill or when we're old, to help women during childbirth, to help support women in domestic violence refuges. And that's why this is important. It's a bit of practical support for people while they do their practical training. I was at a hospital not far from here with the member for Canberra last week, and we met a nursing student named Anne. And she told us that she has to move to regional New South Wales to do her prac. It means she has to move away from her family and she has to pay rent at 2 places at once. She broke it down like this. Placements are an expensive cost to students. Sometimes you have to travel to rural placements and we're out of pocket. So we're effectively paying for placement. And unfortunately, that invaluable experience doesn't pay our bills. So our bills don't stop. So this is a fabulous incentive. I got this email the other day from Natalie, a teaching student at Western Sydney University. I didn't actually think the government would make major changes in the way that they have with HECS and paid prac. This will be incredibly helpful for me, my levels of stress and my bank account. Mr Speaker, these are important reforms. The changes to HECS will help with the cost of degrees. The new paid prac will help with the cost of living. They'll help to train more teachers, help to train more nurses and more midwives and more social workers. It's all a fundamental part of building a future made right here in Australia.
The call to the member for Wannon.
My question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Is the ABF's drone fleet still grounded?
Give the call to the Minister for Home Affairs and the Minister for Cybersecurity.
Thank you so much, and I thank the Shadow Minister for his question. This was dealt with by estimates in ABF, and I invite you to look at the transcript.
Give the call. Order. 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 Give the call to the Chief Government Whip.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. What will be the impact of today's national wage case decision in assisting working people with cost of living? What other support is being provided and what opposition is there?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Chief Government Whip for her question. And indeed, people in the electorate of Lalor will welcome the decision today by the Fair Work Commission for a 3.75% increase. Now, because inflation's running at 3.6, that means a real wage increase. The minimum wage now is $24.10 per hour, a $3.77 increase since we came to office. More than $140 extra per week. Now, it took the now opposition their entire wasted decade in office to lift the minimum wage by as much as we have in just the 2 years in which we have been in office. As a direct result, 2.6 million workers will benefit, more money in their pocket. And of course we know, I'm asked about alternatives, we know what those opposites' attitude is. Because this morning they were out there saying, Senator Hume, saying that it would be the worst thing if low-paid workers got real wages growth. It would be the worst thing. But that's consistent with what the Leader of the Opposition said when he voted against our IR legislation because it would result in higher wages. Well, we support working people getting ahead. And it's just like they did in the election campaign, where we had the dollar coin. We had the dollar coin. And I brought it out in the election campaign, Mr Speaker, and I said, when asked, would I welcome people on the minimum wage not going backwards, I said absolutely. Absolutely. And I stand by that, and we've done that in government. But of course it's not just higher wages. We want people to earn more and to keep more of what they earn. And on July 1, both of those things will happen. Both of them opposed by those opposite who've never supported a wage increase, who supported low wage growth as being a key feature of their economic architecture, and who, when we proposed changing the tax cuts to deliver for working people, including for those under $45,000 a year, those opposite said they'd roll it back, they'd reverse it, we should have an election on it before they voted for it, Mr Speaker. We know that they are not concerned with the living standards of working people, how out of touch they are, which is why they've opposed all of our cost of living measures. And on that note, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.